Is all about the moon. I can describe both the changing phases of the moon and the tides in relationship to the revolution of the moon. We're also going to be learning about eclipses as well here. So let's just start with the motion of the moon. Something interesting about the moon is that its revolution and its rotation are exactly the same. Earth's rotation, if you remember, is 24 hours and its revolution is 365 days. But the moon, it takes 27.3 days to both rotate and revolve, which means we are always looking at the same side of the moon. And the light that we see from the moon is not coming from the moon. It's actually light that comes from the sun that reflects onto the moon that we see from Earth. Let's get into the phases of the moon. The phases of the moon are different forms the moon takes in its appearance on Earth, and it depends on the position of the sun, the Earth, and the moon. A new moon is when we look up in the sky and we actually don't see any moon at all, really. It rises and sets with the sun, and the sun is lighting up the dark side of the moon. So the moon is in between the Earth and the sun, and we can't see any of that light emitted. So we don't really see the moon in the sky. Then the moon phases start to grow, and we call that waxing. So anytime you start to see the right side of the moon illuminated, whether it's a waxing crescent, which is often called like God's thumb, or a waxing gibbous, that means the right side is the part that's lit up and visible. Then we have a full moon. A full moon is that big, beautiful moon that you see when you look up into the sky once a month and the whole thing is illuminated. Really just half the moon is illuminated, but to us it looks like the entire thing is beautiful and illuminated. Then you get into the waning phases where the left side of the moon is actually the visible side of the moon. And this video is really cool. It'll show you all of the moon phases repeating and repeating in this time-lapse video. Here's a picture of all the phases together. You start at new moon, and then from the Earth, the right side of the moon will be visible and illuminated in these in the waxing first quarter and waxing gibbous. Then you get to that big, beautiful full moon. So the sun would be coming from over here. So if the sun is lighting up this moon, we see it here from Earth. Then you get into the waning phases where the left side of the moon is illuminated from Earth. Let's talk about an eclipse. In eclipse, there's a solar and a lunar eclipse, and it has to do with the shadow of an object from Earth that we see. So these only occur when the sun, the Earth, and the moon are perfectly lined up together, and it only happens a few times a year. The solar eclipse is when the moon moves directly in between the sun and the Earth and casts a shadow over part of Earth. The moon is much smaller than both the sun and the Earth. So when it does cast this shadow, you'll see it's only in a small section of Earth. There was a beautiful solar eclipse that happened a few years back. And from Charlottesville, we could actually see a partial solar eclipse. But where my parents live in St. Louis, they could see a full solar eclipse, and it became not pitch black, but almost pitch black in the middle of the day. This video is so awesome. You guys should definitely watch this video on the solar eclipse. It's a really, really cool image of what it looks like. Then you have a lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse is when the Earth is directly in between the sun and the moon. So then what happens is at night you get this shadow that comes over the moon. These happen more often because when it does happen, it happens over the whole Earth. Because the moon is smaller, the Earth is so much bigger, we all see that shadow over the moon. So these happen more often. You're more likely to see this. Here's a cool video of an actual lunar eclipse there. Then let's talk about tides. And I don't know what happened to the background of this slide, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So tides are the alternate rising and falling of the ocean. So when there's high tide and low tide, and you've maybe been on the beach and seen that before, and that's when the ocean comes up higher or lower. And that actually has everything to do with the gravity of the moon. If you notice in this image, the moon's gravity will pull at the ocean at different points, which will cause high tide and low tide to occur. So the tides are actually controlled by the moon as well. Oh, there you can see it now. I just needed to delete that other slide. And then the last thing is the surface of the moon. You're going to learn so much more about this in our next exploration. And when we studied the moon, we know that all of these craters were created by asteroids and comets striking the Earth. Again, you'll learn more about this in your next exploration. And those are your notes.